What's going on, everybody? So in today's video I'm going to be talking about what I consider to be the top 10 worst anime that I've seen. Please understand that this list is in no particular order, and just because you see that one show is at a lower position within the list, that doesn't mean that it's the worst out of all of the series that I'm going to talk about. And also, I know I'm probably wasting my energy by saying this, but don't attack me if you disagree with some of my choices. This is just my personal list that I decided to share with you guys, and I encourage you to actually leave your list of top 10 worst anime series in the comment section below. With that being said, let's get started. At number 10, I've got Inuyasha. This show gave me headaches back in the day, and I personally felt it was quite boring. It doesn't help that the show didn't age well, even by the time that I first watched it back on Toonami in 2012. Dialogue was often really repetitive from what I can remember, and it was poorly paced. It's been a long time since I watched the show. I don't really remember much aside from the girl yelling, "Sit boy sit, sit boy sit, sit boy sit," and really hating the horrible romance element of the show. At number 9, I've got School Days. I discovered this show one night many years ago while browsing an anime streaming site at 3 o'clock a.m. in the morning. I'm not ashamed to admit that I was really entertained by this short series due to how extremely unrealistic the characters are and just how out of left field some of the plot twists were. I'm not the biggest fan of slice of life and romance anime, but this one had me hooked just because of how insanely bad, how insanely horrible the writing is. School Days feels like it was written by a 14-year-old. And I'm not even exaggerating when I say this. It's really one of those series that you honestly have to watch just to see how bad it really is. At number 8, I got Sword Art Online. So, Sword Art Online was one of those shows that started off really strong. The idea of a character being trapped inside of a virtual world wasn't anything new at the time that the show came out, but it's always intriguing to see how different anime chooses to tackle that situation with its characters. The first dozen episodes of Sword Art Online was simply fantastic. The characters in the world were set up nicely, and the show really emphasized the psychological effects of being trapped inside a game with your life on the line. The first part of Sword Art Online worked because the protagonist Kirito was on his own in the beginning and wasn't incredibly overpowered at first. The whole lone wolf mentality, coupled with the fact that the players were looking down on him for being one of the people that played in the beta, really worked. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not a big fan of romance anime, but when the show introduced the romance element with the character of Asuna, I thought it worked quite well at first. However, as the show got to the end of the Aincrad arc, things went completely downhill. The series introduced some really stupid elements like the AI character Yui and a whole harem of useless dull characters. Kirito became a completely broken OP character, and Asuna would soon devolve into a weak character during the Alfheim arc. The sense of the real danger for these characters was practically gone during the Alfheim arc. The main antagonists for both arcs were disappointing, and there were many plot holes in each arc. In general, the writing was terrible after the first initial episodes. The only consistently impressive things about the show were its top-notch animation and music. At number 7, I have Sword Art Online 2. This continuation of Sword Art Online continued to suffer from a lot of the issues that plagued the original. The animation and music were still amazing to experience, but outside of that, there isn't really much to praise about the show. The first arc, dealing with Gun Gale Online, introduced a new character named Asuna Shino, in which she was struggling to deal with her fear of guns after an incident that occurred years ago. Initially, the character brought back the psychological aspect of the show, and the threat of a player named Death Gun killing people in real life brought back the sense of real danger for the characters. However, the show completely squanders the potential of its plot and the new character. There are many plot holes within this arc alone, and things get quite convoluted when the mystery behind the Death Gun murders is revealed. Also, the VR game introduced in this arc proves that the series creator, Reki Karahara, knows very little about online shooters. After the Gun Gale Online arc, the show completely slows down and becomes a chore to watch. There were a lot of pointless episodes dealing with characters, situations in real life that were quite uninteresting. From what I can remember, the show has the audacity to bring back Alfheim Online, which was one of the worst parts of the second half of the first series. Overall, Sword Art Online 2 managed to somehow be worse than the first series. At number 6, I've got Dot Hack Sign. I'm a big fan of the Dot Hack video game series created by CyberConnect 2. Heck, I even bought the remastered version of Dot Hack GU a year ago when it was released on PlayStation 4. The games were really fun and I had a lot of fond memories playing through each game. However, the anime series was completely utter garbage. From what I can remember, the series was poorly paced and very boring most of the time. Dot Hack was the piece of media that introduced me to the concept of someone being trapped inside of a virtual video game world where they must struggle to survive. The games had such interesting lore and characters, so it's a shame that the anime couldn't be as good as the games were. At number 5, I've got Attack on Titan. This has to be one of the most overrated anime within recent years. I remember when everyone was hyping this show up in the anime community, and I decided to watch the first season when it aired on Toonami. This series is literally all spectacle and no substance. Gruesome deaths on display are largely for shock value, and honestly can lose its luster after a while. The main character, Eren Yeager, is such a horrible one-note character that annoyed the heck out of me. There are no interesting characters aside from Levi, and even he's kinda dull. The show introduces Titan transformations, which completely undermines the premise of humans versus Titans and makes the human struggle against the giant beast less compelling. The show can get really boring after a while and suffers from a similar issue that has plagued The Walking Dead for years, in which there isn't enough levity or interesting side stories to keep you invested until the next gruesome Titan kill. I was honestly so underwhelmed by the first season that I ended up dropping the show after the first season. The cliffhanger ending and the fact that the mystery behind Eren's father and their basement was unresolved by the finale really left a horrible taste in my mouth. At number 4, I've got Dragon Ball Super. I'm a big fan of Dragon Ball Z. It was the show that got me into anime as a kid during the 1990s and the early 2000s. After years of wanting a sequel, I was excited to see that Akira Toriyama was coming back to produce a new series. But I'll be blunt, Dragon Ball Super is one of the worst sequels to a beloved series I've ever seen. At times, it almost feels like it's an excuse to sell merchandise by giving Goku and Vegeta more transformations. The show had a rough start with its animation, but it eventually improved by the time we got the final tournament of Power Arc. The show manages to retcon quite a few things that were introduced in Dragon Ball Z, but only manages to mess up the lore for the sake of plot convenience. Similar to the original Dragon Ball Z, this show suffers from horrible pacing with long drawn out battles spanning many episodes. The last arc in particular is just as bad as the Namek arc, where the passage of time between episodes is insane. The series introduced the idea of a large multiverse within the Dragon Ball universe, which is a good idea because of the different characters and places that could be presented in the future. The series introduced the idea of a larger multiverse within the Dragon Ball universe, which is a good idea because of the different characters and places that could be presented in the future. However, the series largely misses the mark when it comes to its newer characters. Outside of characters like Beerus, Jocko, and Zeno, and a few others, the character designs are horrible. The new Super Saiyans introduced from Universe 6 are horrible design-wise. Actually, aside from Kaba, the female Saiyans are just badly rushed characters that turn the Super Saiyan transformation into one big joke and only help to inflate another long-running issue within the series: power scaling. Power scaling will always be an issue with Dragon Ball, especially when it comes to this series in particular, and it will most likely be left unresolved even when the series returns in whatever form it takes. When a powerful foe that outclasses Goku and Vegeta comes along, like Jiren or Toppo for example, you know some BS transformation isn't too far from being introduced, despite the fact that we've never seen neither Goku nor Vegeta actually train to master and acquire their newly found power. Overall, Dragon Ball Super was an underwhelming return for the franchise, despite the fact that it ended off on a high note. The return of characters like Frieza and Future Trunks in the Golden Frieza and Future Trunks sagas respectively seems to be more of a move to cater to nostalgia. The Future Trunks saga is the worst arc in the entire show, and it ruined the character of Future Trunks for me personally, especially with how the arc was resolved with the main villain's defeat. The strongest arcs in the show, the Universe 6 saga and the God of Destruction saga, are nowhere near the quality of the Cell saga and the Saiyan saga from the original Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Super was simply disappointing. At the number 3 spot, I've got Superior Defender Gundam Force, or SD Gundam. I won't lie to you guys, I loved this show as a kid, despite how weird it was seeing chibi versions of Gundam models talking and getting into conflicts with one another. Don't have much to really say about this series because I know how bad it is now, but at the time I really enjoyed it, just as I did any other regular Gundam show. At the number 2 spot, I have Fairy Tail. I think a lot of anime fans would probably include this anime on their worst of list. I reluctantly added this series to my list despite the fact that I've become a huge Fairy Tail fan over the last 4 months. I love how lighthearted and humorous the show is, and I've even grown attached to a lot of its characters. However, as much as I love the show, I've got to admit that it has a lot of problems. One of the main characters, Natsu, is one note and underdeveloped. The dialogue is often cheesy, repetitive, and very heavy-handed. The basic story structure is repetitive, and it handles its core themes of friendship and family poorly. As I said in my review for the series, Fairy Tail uses its themes of friendship and family as a crutch, which is why a lot of people refer to the series as the Power of Friendship anime. Fairy Tail is a poorly written show, so I had to put it on the list regardless of the fact that I really enjoy watching it. At the number 1 spot, I've got Tokyo Ghoul. This anime started out decently, but just like Dot Axon, it was kind of boring. Didn't really help that the main protagonist wasn't very interesting, and by the end of season 1 going into season 2, the main protagonist turns into a completely different character. I'll lie to you not. To be honest with you, I don't really remember a lot from the show, but that's just how forgettable it was. It was a bland show, at least in my opinion. But yeah, that's gonna do it for my list. Let me know what you guys think about this list in the comment section below. And like I said before, feel free to leave your list in the comment section below. Like the video, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. This has been Fear No Hate. I'm out of here. Peace.